In this video we will go over an example of standard costing, and this example comes from your homework, your Chapter 10 homework in the online homework system in Connect. So let's pull it up here. If you look here at your Chapter 10 homework, question number 5. Now the numbers might be different here because the numbers change every time I pull it up, but it's going to be the same assignment, same question. And this question tends to cause most trouble for people as far as standard costing goes. And if you can answer this question, it turns out that you probably understand standard costing pretty well. It's a rather involved question. Let's get right into it here. So, excuse me. This company produces a number of products, including a body wrap kit. And standard variable costs relating to a single kit are given below. So this right here is basically a standard cost card. For one kit, for one unit of output, this is what it costs the company to make that unit in terms of direct materials, direct labor, and variable manufacturing overhead. So we have these three columns. We have the standard quantity, or hours, standard price, or rate, and then the standard cost. So for example, this right here would be for one body wrap kit. How many, excuse me, this thing always comes up. I don't know how to get rid of that actually. It's always going to come up whenever I do these videos. But anyway, for one kit, how many, in this case I believe, yards of direct materials does one kit use? It's a body wrap kit, so the materials are in yards of body wrap. And then right here is per yard, how much does it cost the company to purchase the materials. And so for one kit, then this would be the standard cost. If one kit requires 4 yards of materials and each yard costs $4, then for one kit it's going to cost the company $16 in terms of direct materials. And then for labor, right here, this is going to be how many hours does it take in direct labor to make one kit. This is what they pay their employees, or what they should pay their employees per hour. It might not be the same as what they actually paid them per hour. This is the standard rate. It's what the standard calls for. It's sort of an average of all their employees' wage rates. Some employees are more senior employees, they make more per hour. Others are new employees, they make less per hour. This would represent the average. And then this would just be the cost for labor for one kit. And then variable overhead, it looks like labor drives overhead in this example, because you can see the standard rate here is $2 per direct labor hour. Every labor hour that's worked, the company expects variable manufacturing overhead to go up by $2. So that means since labor drives overhead in this example, the standard quantity right here for variable manufacturing overhead is the same as the standard quantity for direct labor. It just represents the number of hours it takes to make one body wrap kit, number of labor hours. So they give us this information here, and they say that during August 400 kits were manufactured and sold. And they gave us some other information down here, and they gave us a little bit more information. And here there are 6 questions. Let's just get right into the questions, and you can see answers already given there, but we're going to show how to get each of the answers. So the first question is, what was the total standard cost of the materials used during August? So we can do that. Let's figure out though, which one of these question marks are they asking for? They're asking for this one right here. They made 400 kits. This is the actual output. And the question is, what's the total standard cost of materials used during August? In other words, to make the actual 400 kits, what should it have cost them to make that in terms of materials, in terms of just materials? We know that to make the 400 kits, it should have cost them $5,400 in direct labor dollars, and it should have cost them $1,800 in variable overhead. But as far as direct materials, what should it have cost them? It actually cost them $8,000, but what should it have cost them according to the standard? All this question mark is the standard cost per kit, what it should cost them per kit for materials, times the 400 actual kits that were made. But we can't get this until we get this. So what we're going to do here, the strategy is we're going to try to get this question mark right here, And once we get that, we can multiply it by 4 and we'll have this question mark. Once we have this question mark, we can take that and multiply it by 400 and we'll have the answer. How to get this question mark? Or I guess if we can get maybe this question mark first, then we can just divide by 4 and we have this, right? So how to get either this one or this one? Well, the strategy what we're going to use here is we're going to figure out this question mark and this question mark. And once we know those two, we know that the sum of these three is 47. So we can just subtract the sum of these two from 47 and that'll give us this one. That's our strategy. Then we just divide that by 4 and that'll give us this. Or we don't even, well, we will need this eventually, but once we have this one, then we can answer the question. We can just take the standard cost per kit for materials, what it should cost us to make one kit in terms of materials, times the actual kits we made, and that'll tell us what it should have cost us for materials this month. Alright, so let's see here. What can we do? We know what it cost us for labor, or what it should have cost us for labor to make 400 kits. So 5,400 divided by 400 should be this. We know what it should have cost us for overhead for the 400 kits, because they give that to us, right? So here's what it should cost us per kit, times 400 kits for overhead, equals 1,800. So to get this question mark, we just take 1,800 divided by 400. And that gives us both of this question mark and this question mark. And then we could subtract the sum of these from 47 and we'll have this right here. So that's our strategy. So let's write down here total direct material standard cost. We know this is what we want. We know it's the direct materials standard cost per kit times the actual number of kits. We know the actual number of kits, they give that to us, but they don't give us the direct materials standard cost per kit. We know they actually made 400 kits this month. Told us that, right? Here. So total direct labor standard cost, we know it equals the direct labor standard cost per kit times 400 kits. And we know that equals, they told us what that equaled, 5,400 was what we should have spent for labor for these 400 kits that we made. So we can get the direct labor standard cost per kit. It's just 5,400 divided by 400. Or if we calculate that real quick, 13.5. The total variable manufacturing overhead is equal to the variable manufacturing overhead per kit times the actual number of kits the variable manufacturing overhead standard cost per kit times the actual number of kits, and we know that equaled 1,800. They told us that. So we can figure out the variable manufacturing overhead. I guess I'll just abbreviate it like this. Standard cost per kit is just 1,800 over 400, or $4.50. So we know this and we know this. It means we know this question mark and we know this question mark. So the direct materials standard cost per kit is equal to the total standard cost per kit minus the direct labor standard cost per kit minus the variable manufacturing overhead standard cost per kit. Let me shut my phone up. So total standard cost per kit was 47. The direct labor standard cost per kit was 13.5 here, and the variable overhead standard cost per kit was 4.5 here. So the direct material standard cost per kit is 47 minus 13.5 minus 4.5, or $29. So it should have cost us $29 per kit for direct materials. That's not what it asked us. It didn't ask us on a per kit basis. It asked us what's the total standard cost for direct materials for August. What should it have cost us to make the 400 kits? Well, we can go put that in up here. Right? We can go put in this all the way back up here. Total direct material standard cost would be the direct material standard cost per kit, which we figured out, 29, times the 400 equals 11,600. That's the answer. So 11,600 for the first one. You can check, see it's right there. Now, number 2. How many yards of material are required at standard per kit? They're asking for this right here. Well, if we know that this is 29, right, then we can figure out how many yards of materials are required at standard. So the direct materials standard quantity per kit is equal to the direct materials standard cost, total standard cost per kit, right, divided by the direct materials standard price per unit of the direct materials per yard, or $29 per kit divided by each yard of direct materials costs $4, right? So per kit we expect to use 7.25 yards. $7.25 yards of direct materials. And let's see, does that make sense? Yeah. So yards per kit. Even the units work out, right? Because we have $29 per kit divided by $4 per yard. It's the same thing as multiplying by yards, like that, right? And the dollars cancel, and 7.25 yards per kit. So even the units work out. Number 3. What was the materials price variance for August if there were no beginning or ending inventories? That means whatever they purchased, how many ever direct materials they purchased, how many ever yards of direct materials they purchased, they used all of the stuff that they purchased. So there's no beginning or ending inventories of materials. So let's go to the next page, because it's going to require a little bit more space. So materials price variance, we know, is equal to the actual quantity of materials that we purchased, right, times the price we paid per unit of direct materials, minus the price we should have paid per unit, minus the standard price. This is our materials price variance. It reflects the dollar amount, what we spent more or less than what we should have spent. If it's negative, then it's favorable. That means we spent less than what we should have. If it's positive, then it's unfavorable. We spent more than what we should have. All right. We have three things here, but we only know what one of them is at this time, right? The standard price is $4 per yard, right? But we don't know what the actual price. What did we pay per yard actually? And we don't know how many yards we purchased actually, right? How can we get this information? It tells us the actual amount we spent for materials, $8,000, but it doesn't tell us how many yards we bought, right? If it doesn't tell us how many yards we bought, we can't divide by the yards to figure out how much we spent per yard, actually. Also doesn't tell us what we spent per yard, actually, so we can't divide by that and get the number of yards we bought. We can't get either one of those. But what we can do is we can use the fact that it tells us that the materials quantity variance is 4,400 unfavorable. So let's go down here. We know the materials quantity variance is equal to the standard price times the actual quantity of direct materials used minus the standard quantity of direct materials, the number of yards of materials we should have used. Now, since there are no beginning or ending inventories of materials, the actual quantity of materials we use is the same as what the actual quantity of materials purchased. So I can replace this with AQ sub P here. So if we can solve for it here, then we'll have that, and we can use it up here. So let's see. What should we have spent per yard for direct materials? The standard price. Well, we know that's $4 per yard, right? I mean, that's just right here. Now, we don't know what AQ, we'll call it, we don't know what this is. We don't know how many materials we used or purchased. It was the same amount. But can we get at the standard quantity, what we should have used? Yes, we can, right? So the standard quantity is equal to, for each kit, we should have used 7.25 yards, right? We solved for that earlier, right up here. For each kit, we should have used 7.25 yards, and we produced 400 kits this month. So we should have used our standard quantity. What we should have used in total is 2,900 yards, right? And we know the materials quantity variance is equal to, they tell us what it is. It's 4,400 unfavorable right here. So it's a positive 4,400. Positive represents unfavorable if it's a cost variance. So we can solve this equation here for AQP, and that'll tell us what we actually purchased, the number of yards of materials we purchased. And we can take that and put it right here. And then all we have left to solve for is how much did we pay per yard. But we know we spent $8,000 in total for direct materials. And if we divide it by how many yards we purchased, that'll tell us what we paid per yard. Right? So let's solve for AQP here. We have AQP would equal 4,400 plus 4 times the 2,900, all divided by 4, or oops, I made an error in my calculator. Let's see, 4,400 plus 4 times 2,900, all of that divided by 4, 4,000. 4,000 yards. So let's put that here. So we must have purchased 4,000 yards, and if we spent $8,000 to purchase those 4,000 yards, right, then we must have spent $2 per yard. We should have spent $4 per yard, but we only spent $2 per yard. So this material's price variance then is going to be negative 8,000, or said a different way, $8,000 favorable materials price variance. Assuming that we didn't get a bunch of cheap crap because we were able to save $2 per yard, maybe, yeah, we saved money, but we got a bunch of cheap crap. Assuming we were still able to get the same quality of materials, this negative, or this favorable variance is a good thing. We got a discount on the same quality of materials. That's a good thing. $8,000 favorable materials price variance. So we can check and see if that's right. You can see it is favorable. Number 4, what is the standard direct labor rate per hour? Standard direct labor rate per hour. What are they asking for? They're asking for this right here. Well, remember, the standard direct labor rate per hour is also the same as the standard variable manufacturing overhead rate per hour, because labor drives overhead in this example. So if we can find this, it's the same thing as this. And then once we have, actually, they're not asking for this, sorry. They're asking for this. What are we supposed to pay our employees per hour? All right. We already know what this is. We solved for this in part 1, I believe. It was 13.5. We know that 13.5 is the product of these two numbers right here. We just don't know either one of them. What we're going to do is we're going to find this one first. And then we're just going to take 13.5 divided by that to get our standard labor rate per hour. To find this number, just realize it's the same as this one, because labor drives overhead. We can find this one right here, this bottom one, right? Because we know what this is, and we know that's 2 here, so just take this divided by 2, that gives you this, which gives you this, and then take 13.5 divided by this right here. Divide by this, and you'll have your standard labor rate per hour. What was the total standard cost for variable manufacturing overhead? Right here, per kit. Well, we found that in part 1. It was 4.5, right? So the variable manufacturing overhead standard quantity per kit is just equal to the variable manufacturing overhead standard cost per kit divided by the variable manufacturing overhead standard rate, or the way we abbreviate that usually, and the way I've done it in the lecture notes, is the standard, how did I abbreviate it? Let's make sure we stay consistent here. SVOHR, standard variable overhead rate. So it's $4.5 per kit divided by $2 per direct labor hour. Right? Here's the standard variable overhead rate. So that means that the standard quantity, each kit should require 2.25 hours to make. Right? So that means that the direct labor standard rate per hour is just equal to the direct labor standard cost per kit divided by the direct labor standard quantity per kit, which is equal to the direct labor standard cost per kit we found was 13.5. It's this number right here. All we're saying is that this question mark equals this question mark divided by this question mark. It's direct labor standard cost per kit, which is 13.5. Divided by the direct labor standard quantity per kit. But the direct labor standard quantity per kit is the same as the variable manufacturing overhead standard quantity per kit, because labor drives overhead. So whatever we found right here, that's the same as down here. It should take 2.25 hours to make a kit. So what are we paying? What should we pay our employees per hour? What's the standard call for in terms of paying our employees per hour? 13.5 divided by 2.25. So we should be paying them $6 per hour. And that's what it asked us for. What is the standard direct labor rate per hour? 6. Moving on, number 5. What was the labor rate variance for August? What was the labor efficiency variance for August? Let's go to the next page. The labor rate variance is the actual number of hours our employees worked minus what we actually paid them per hour, times what we actually paid them per hour minus what we should have paid them per hour. Well, we know we should have paid them $6 per hour. We just figured that out. How much did we actually pay them per hour? And how many hours did they actually work? They actually worked 1,000 hours, so we know what actual hours are. How much should we have paid them per hour? How much did we pay them per hour? Well, it doesn't tell us the actual direct labor costs. If we knew the actual total cost for direct labor, we could just divide it by the actual hours, and that'll tell us what we paid them per hour. Actually, the actual rate. So we can't get the actual rate until we get this. Right? And we can actually get this question mark through a two-step process. First, this becomes important, right? The difference between the standard cost per kit and the actual cost per kit is 17 cents unfavorable. Here's the standard cost per kit, what it should cost us to make one kit. What did it actually cost us to make one kit? Well, it cost us this for materials, plus this for labor, plus this for overhead, divided by 400. That's what it actually costs us per kit. That number needs to be 0.17 bigger than this number, because it's unfavorable. We actually spent 17 cents more than we should have. So let's write that out. Total actual cost per kit is equal to direct materials plus direct labor actual cost plus variable manufacturing overhead actual cost. But on a per kit basis, then divide by the actual 400 kits that we made. And we know that this total actual cost per kit is equal to what? It must be equal to 47.17, because it said the difference between the total actual cost per kit and the total standard cost per kit is 0.17 unfavorable. So it must have cost us 17 cents more per kit actually than what it should have if it's an unfavorable variance. So that's why we know this should be 47.17. And we know so we have one equation here. What's the only thing we don't know? This. Because we know direct materials total actual cost was $8,000. We don't know labor. We do know the overhead told us right here, $1,820. Then we divide by 400 and set it equal to 47.17. Solve for DL. That'll tell us what we actually spent for direct labor in total. Right? So that means that DL equals 47.17 times 400 minus 8,000 minus 1,820. So what we actually spent for direct labor is $9,048. So we know what we actually spent for direct labor. We're trying to figure out the labor rate variance. We need the actual rate. We know the actual rate would be what we spent for direct labor divided by the actual hours. We know we spent $9,048. We just figured that out. We know our employees worked 1,000 hours, so we must be paying them $9.05 per hour, approximately. So our labor rate variance then is just 9.048 minus 6 times 1,000, or 3,048. And is it a favorable or unfavorable variance? We're paying them $3.05 more than what we should have. That's got to be unfavorable. It's not good. Remember, when a cost variance is positive, it's always unfavorable. When it's negative, it's always favorable. So we can check and make sure 3,048 right here. And then the efficiency variance, so the labor efficiency variance, we know, it's just the standard rate, what we should have paid them per hour, times the number of hours they actually worked minus the number of hours they should have worked. We know we paid them 6. We know they worked. We know that we should have paid them 6. That's what the standard calls for. We know they actually worked 1,000 hours. How many hours should they have worked to make these 400 kits? Well, how many hours does it take to make one kit, according to the standard? Well, let's find out. We figured that out earlier, right here. Should take 2.25 hours per kit, right? So the standard calls for working 2.25 hours per kit, and we know we made 400 kits this month, actually. So we should have worked 900 hours. We actually worked 1,000 hours. We worked 100 more hours than we should have. That's not good, right? It's unfavorable. So the variance then is 6 times 100, or $600 unfavorable. $6 per hour, and these are both in hours. All right, so $6 per hour times 100 hours would be $600 unfavorable. And we can check and make sure that that's correct. Now, question 6, the final one. Well, then question 7, but we've already pretty much done question 7. It's just filling in that standard cost card. Question 6, it asks, what was the variable overhead rate variance for August, and what was the variable overhead efficiency variance for August? So let's go ahead and do that. So the variable overhead rate variance, I believe this is how I abbreviated this in lecture. The formula from lecture notes is the actual hours times the actual variable overhead rate minus the standard variable overhead rate. And this, in general, it's the actual quantity of the cost driver. But in this case, the number of direct labor hours drives overhead. And so I just put, the quantity of the cost driver is hours, so I just put actual hours. And we know they actually worked 1,000 hours. The actual variable overhead rate, we don't know. The standard variable overhead rate is $2 per hour. We know that. Right? They told us that at the very beginning right here. There's the standard variable overhead rate. The actual variable overhead rate is equal to the total actual variable overhead cost, which they told us we spent $1,820 for overhead actual cost incurred this year, right here, $1,820. So the actual variable overhead rate is the actual overhead cost divided by the actual level of the cost driver. Right? So that $1.82 per hour is the actual variable overhead rate. We were incurring overhead this period, this month, at a rate actually of $1.82 per hour. The standard calls for $2 per hour. So we're able to do better than the standard. So this is going to be a favorable overhead variance. 1.82 minus 2 times 1,000. Negative 180. $180 favorable variable overhead rate variance. And we can check and make sure that's correct. Yes, right here. And then the overhead efficiency variance would be take the standard variable overhead rate, multiply it by the actual hours minus the standard hours, or the actual quantity of whatever drives overhead minus the standard quantity. But since the cost driver is labor hours, we can just use hours here as the we can just call it SH and AH instead of AQ and SQ. So we know the standard variable overhead rate's 2, we know the actual hours is 1,000, and we know they should have worked 900, right? We got that right here. So that means the variable overhead efficiency variance, $2 per hour times 100 hours, 200 unfavorable. It's positive, so it's unfavorable. And we can check and make sure that that's correct. And then part 7, it just says complete the standard cost card shown at the beginning of the problem. Well, we've already done it actually. So let's just fill in. What does the standard cost card look like? So we have our DM, DL, and variable overhead. And then we have total. Then we have a column for standard quantity and a column for standard rate, basically. And then we have a total column, or a standard cost column. This is for one body wrap kit. Standard cost is always standard quantity times standard rate. So we know one kit should require how many yards of direct materials again? I can't remember. I believe we solved for that up here. 7.25 yards. And we know each yard costs $4, I believe. Each yard, it told us that, didn't it? $4 per yard, yeah. And the standard cost was $29, I believe, per kit for materials. Labor, each kit required 2.25 hours. And we should pay our employees, I think this was $6 per hour. And this was 13.5. And then variable overhead, again, 2.25 hours, because labor drives overhead. Standard variable overhead rate was $2 per hour, and this was $4.5. And we know the total standard cost per kit was 47. If you add 29, 13.5, and 4.5, you get 47. So there's the answer to number 7. This completes the video on standard costing.